Hello. What's your name?
Sam.
Sam. Hi, Sam. Welcome. It's your first time, yeah?
Yeah.
You live in Tiru?
Yes.
Oh, okay. You're from Tiru?
No, I'm from Chennai.
You're from Chennai? Okay. How long have you been living here?
Around 3 months.
Oh, nice. Enjoying it?
Yeah.
You used to come before to visit?
Here? No, this is my first time.
Oh, really? Okay. Then you decided to stay?
Yeah.
You came once and then you stayed, or you went back again?
Yes, yes.
Oh,
We're
nice.
going back. Coming back.
Nice.
Going from Chennai.
Welcome. So there's no formality, Sam, no? It's just open question answer. We share, we talk, whatever. Set thing. See what happens. So would anybody
Kind
like
of
to-
dialogue.
Huh?
It's a dialogue.
It's a dialogue. Exactly. And you can share whatever you want, any question. Everything is okay.
Okay.
Anybody want to start today?
What is enlightenment?
Oh, good question. So, from what you know already, what is your idea, understanding of what enlightenment is?
I feel like enlightenment is ending the suffering.
Okay, good.
That's it.
Good.
It's a simple definition.
Super, super. Did you hear that somewhere, or you came to that conclusion yourself?
No, we friends used to have a dialogue personally. We used to discuss many things. So from that, like we conclude that because enlightenment become the most polluted way nowadays, because it become a kind of business. Like if you come for 3 days retreat, you'll get enlightenment course
Right.
like that. So it is not like mental gymnastic. I feel like it's nothing more like the suffering is there. So ending the suffering is enlightenment. That's what I feel.
Okay, super. And that's what you're looking for? That's what you would like?
I think it's a fact. Ending the suffering is enlightenment. It's not I'm looking for.
You're not looking for it?
No. Actually, I'm looking for that. But like if you come with the motive, like I have to get something, like I have to get something from that, getting something from the life, like it becomes like a want. I'm coming from the ground of want.
Right.
Then the whole purpose is like futile.
Right.
That's what I'm thinking. So we always think about something getting out of life. No, it's not about that.
It's not what?
It's not about that. That's what I feel.
It's not
Something getting out of life.
Okay.
Something like like always, life is about living, right? Something deriving something out of life. No, it's not about profit and loss.
Right.
That's what I feel.
So your idea, I agree with your idea, it's the end of suffering. What is the suffering that ends, in your understanding?
Suffering. Usually, humans suffer due to their mind, because our mind is is not in order.
So, can you be more specific? What's the exact suffering that ends? If it's the mind, I agree with you.
Mind comes to an order. Mind comes to
Mind comes to order.
Yeah.
Okay. What does that mean practically?
Understanding.
Understanding.
Yeah.
Understanding
non-verbally. Not verbally.
Understanding what? What is the understanding?
Understanding everything.
Okay.
Understanding my day-to-day affairs, my relationships, like understanding fear,
Okay.
understanding psychological fear, understanding death, understanding life.
Right.
So everything. Like if you ask Ramana Maharshi, he has a very good understanding of it.
Right.
Any question if you ask Ramana Maharshi, is having a very clear understanding about everything.
But you
That
said
kind-
that's not in the mind.
Yeah, I
The
think
understanding you're talking about is in the mind? Is the mind understanding or is it beyond the mind? Is it a mental understanding or is it beyond the mental understanding? You know what I mean? So we have an understanding which is thoughts, we can describe it, we can give an answer, we can write a whole book. And then there's another kind of understanding which is not that, it's beyond the intellect.
beyond the intellect.
Beyond the intellect. Is that what you mean?
Yes, beyond the intellect. Because it's not a like I feel like this whole teachings of enlightened people. It's not about some intellectual training. That's it, something much more deeper than the intellectual. Though it talks about intellectual, though it covers the topic, it covers that also, it includes that also, but I feel it's much more deeper than that.
So shall I share my concept of what
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is?
yes, you're welcome. You're welcome.
But I'm curious to know yours, because then that shows me what you understand already and what you're looking for, and then we can go from there.
Sure.
Otherwise, it just becomes an intellectual debate,
Yeah.
which is fine, but it's not as useful. But if you're looking for something and you already understand what it is and what it's not, that's very useful. So, I agree with you, it's the end of a certain kind of suffering. And my teacher was Ramesh Balsekar. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Yeah.
He was a banker all his life. So he was a very practical man and very detailed. So he would go into each individual concept, whether it was Ramana's or his own teacher, or whatever he read, he would really analyze it. So this idea of the end of suffering he agreed with, and then I agreed with it as well. But he would say, and I confirm this from my experience, that if we look at the different kinds of suffering, some kinds end and really end, and some kinds of suffering will not end. So if we start with physical pain as a kind of suffering, we will continue to have some physical pain in our life. Even Ramana had physical pain. That is part of the basic duality of life, pain, pleasure. So-called enlightenment will not end the basic duality of life, pain and pleasure. And that's important to understand and accept, because sometimes the seeker has heard all pain will end. And then they get disappointed when they discover they still have some physical pain. The second kind of suffering is sickness or disease. That will not end. Ramana is also a good example. You know Nisargadatta Maharaj?
Yes.
He also had cancer, a lot of pain. The Buddha, Jesus, many of the great sages had a lot of pain from the sickness or disease. So that cannot be the end of suffering. Then the third and fourth kind are connected. Emotional suffering and psychological suffering. Emotional and psychological suffering can end completely. So if we understand the basis of the emotional and psychological suffering, we discover what you're saying, which is that it's a kind of a mental activity. Thoughts, beliefs, memory, projections into the future, anxiety, fear, but specifically 5 things. Blame, blaming ourselves, blaming the other person. From blame there's guilt and shame. From blame comes hatred, hating the other or hating ourselves. And the 5th one is pride. Pride is not connected to blame. But all of these 5, blame, guilt, shame, hatred and pride, come from what Raman used to call a sense of personal doership. Have you heard that concept?
Yeah.
I call it personal authorship.
Personal?
Authorship.
Okay.
So one of the quotes that my teacher used to use of Ramana was asked one day, what is the difference between a normal person and a sage? And his answer, I think, was really interesting. He said the ego of the sage has no sense of personal doership.
Personal devotion.
So the personal doership, when it drops away, takes away blame, guilt, shame, hatred and pride. So that load of psychological, emotional suffering drops away completely and doesn't come back. So strong emotions, for example sadness, a biological fear in the moment. I see a snake, I react biologically, and fear might arise. Anger, annoyance, frustration, irritation might arise. Strong emotions will not end, but they come and they go. So it's a kind of a suffering for some people because some people are very sensitive emotionally and they will continue to experience that. But the mental part, which is the anger coming biologically, the mind takes it and creates a story. You did something, I did something, blah blah blah, God did something. That disappears. So there is an end to suffering, and I can testify that from my experience as well. But the physical pain will continue, the body will react, continue, and sickness and disease will continue. So when the Buddha said, or Ramana said, many people said there is an end to suffering in this life, conceptually and from my experience and my Guru's experience, this is the kind of suffering that will end. Is that enough for you? If that suffering ends?
Yeah.
That's enough. Wonderful.
See,
I say that because
yeah.
some people hear this and they think, okay, that's enough, but they say, I would also like this. And then we can look at, is it realistic to expect that? Whatever it is. And that's useful to understand. The same with happiness. In Ramana's words, it's every person's birthright to have happiness. Yes? But if we look at what is the kind of happiness he's speaking about, it's different to the kind of happiness that most of us experience. And most of us think happiness is. Happiness is a word. And it's an experience. It's an emotion, a sensation, an energy. So then we think, happiness is that. I have happiness, I don't have happiness. But there's another kind of happiness which is not related to anything that is coming and going. A non-objective happiness, a non-conditional happiness. It's just there. Yes? So much of the time these concepts, from my experience, they're understood initially when we read them or hear them, but then if we test it from our own experience, we discover something else. And that's what I find is really important about all these spiritual teachings. Test it from your own direct experience. Then if you meet somebody that you trust enough, you ask them directly, what is your experience? And if they're reasonably honest, they'll tell you, I have this still, but this has gone away. And then you can make your own conclusion. The same with peace or bliss. Satchitananda. You know that phrase, Satchitananda? Yes? So typically, what does Satchitananda mean?
Bliss.
Ananda means bliss. Yes. Satchit, consciousness, awareness. Something like that. The words are used differently sometimes. Yes? So consciousness aware of itself is bliss. Now, if you sit in the ashram, do you go to the ashram sometimes?
Yeah.
Or on the mountain? Do you get into a
No,
state
I
of
go to
bliss?
ashram.
You go to ashram.
Yeah.
Do you experience a kind of a state of bliss?
Yeah.
Does it last?
No.
No, exactly.
Mm.
So then, consciousness aware of itself cannot be something that does not last. So there must be either a different kind of bliss, or ananda does not mean bliss. So my Guru Ramesh, he looked at the word and he went to the root in Sanskrit and he found there other words that could be used. So he found the word peace. Satchitananda, but ananda meaning peace. Consciousness aware of itself is at peace. And from his own daily experience, he found that peace was a better word to use. There's a permanent peace of mind. Permanent peace of mind. Even when there's physical pain, sickness or disease, strong emotions, things we like or don't like in life, there's an unbroken peace of mind. That was his concept. And I can say the same thing. So, for example, there can be a state of frustration or annoyance or tiredness or whatever it is, yes? But there's still peace of mind. So that peace of mind is different to bliss. And it's different to the state of peace. We'll sit for long enough meditating or doing something and we experience a kind of peaceful state. Would you agree?
Yes.
But it passes. Yes? So it can't be that kind of peace. So unbroken peace of mind, if we check it from our experience, has to be something beyond the state of peace or the state of bliss. Does that make sense? And I think you said it. It comes from understanding.
Yes.
Unbroken peace of mind comes from understanding, but it's an understanding beyond the intellect. Or another way of looking at it is the intellect can no longer cover this peace. It can no longer cover this understanding. In other words, we can't forget anymore who we are. Commonly, on the path, we have a taste of understanding who we are. Then we forget it, or something in life happens, and it seems like we're pulled out of our anchor. Yes? And this will go on for some time. Then one fine day, you might suddenly realize, I'm never forgetting who I am. Anything can happen in my life, but I never forget who I am. That's an understanding beyond the intellect. But it's no longer covered up. It's no longer veiled. And the question would be, is this understanding beyond the intellect, this unbroken peace of mind, is it actually always here? Or does it come and go? Then we discover, actually it's always here. The knowing of who I am is always here. It's always been here, and it always will be here. Then there's no fear of losing it. Yes? And there's no need to even be reminded of it. So typically the person stops practicing, stops sitting to try and get some state or experience, and stops even trying to hear these words as a reminder. Because it's understood, I am always this knowing. Consciousness, the self, God. So finally, for me, enlightenment is not a state. It's just a concept. Because for me, a state is always impermanent.
Impermanent.
Yes. Experiences are impermanent. Like you said, bliss comes and goes. So states also are impermanent. Energies are impermanent. Emotions, sensations. Anything in duality is impermanent. Because there's this and then there's this. Yes? So it's always changing. So for me, the word enlightenment cannot be a state in duality. Because duality is always changing. That's why the Buddha said everything is impermanent. Yes? Everything is dukkha, unsatisfactory. Impermanence and unsatisfactoriness are the core of the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha said there's no individual self. He didn't say individual self. He said anatta. There's no self. So no self means, when we understood it, there's no individual self. There's just the self. Yes? So if there's no individual self, there can't be enlightened beings and non-enlightened beings. Yes? Only if we see individual beings do we believe enlightened being, non-enlightened being. So even when Ramana is using the word sage, he's only using it as a concept to explain it to somebody. He's not believing it himself. Because what happens in the moment of enlightenment is there's the deepest realization of what we are and what we're not. We don't become enlightened. So the description enlightenment self-realization is only a description of a specific moment in time. If I drink this water, then I say I drank fresh water. That's a description of that moment of drinking the water. Self-realization enlightenment is a conceptual description of the moment of the deepest ultimate understanding. It's not a description of a state or a person. You understand the difference? Some people...
So you call it as a concept?
Everything I say is a concept.
Okay.
Everything I say is a concept. Why? Because it comes from thoughts and then words. These are descriptions, pointers. If I say it's a truth, then I would say, this cup is the truth. That means everything else is false.
Yeah, we are fragmenting that. Fragmenting.
A kind of fragmenting.
Yeah.
Exactly. If I say everything is the truth, including what is false, that's a different concept. That's a different understanding of the word truth. So I prefer to say everything is a concept or a pointer. We're conceptually describing or pointing.
I would rather prefer pointers.
Pointer.
Yeah.
So we're pointing towards what cannot be described in words. If I point to an object in duality, then it's very specific. But if I'm pointing to what is not dual, where is it? That's the difference. If the mind calls it a truth, it's immediately created an object out of the pointer. Ramana used an example. He said if you're walking in the forest, in those days he used to walk barefoot, and he would step on a thorn maybe. So he said when you have a thorn in your foot, you take another thorn and you take out the first thorn. Then you have two thorns. What do? You throw them away. You don't keep one thorn for later. So the concepts, the pointers are like that. Each concept pointer is taking away something. Ultimately, there's nothing to claim in thoughts and words. There's a knowing, but it can't be claimed. Do you see the difference? See, if you claim the knowing, let's say you say, I have the knowing, or I have the realization. I have the enlightenment. That means you as an object have it. Yes? But Ramana was pointing to the fact that actually there aren't any separate objects, there's only the self. The self doesn't need to claim anything. The self just is. Does that make sense? So the habit, and you touched upon it, you said there's a kind of an order or a disorder in the mind. So the normal mental habit is to make claims about ourselves or others, the world or even God. But these are all objective claims. Once it's understood there's no actual separate object, there's no need to claim anything. Then it becomes just a point. So if there are no enlightened beings or non-enlightened beings, everybody is the self. Yes? Consciousness, the self, God, life, universal energy. So there's no fundamental difference between the body-mind organism which happened to experience this moment of realization and the body-mind organism that did not experience it. No fundamental difference, meaning that body-mind organism is the self and so is the other body-mind organism, the self. But the realization, which is this moment of deep understanding, does change the order of the mind. You're absolutely right. The main way it changes it is it changes the attitude towards life. The attitude towards the same life changes completely.
Could I add one more point?
Please.
You said in the beginning, like, suffering cannot be not on all the parts of the life, like all the area of the life. Like suppose you added an example like body reacts to pain. So I would slightly differ to the opinion because there is thing like pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional.
That's what I'm saying. So the pain will be there,
yeah,
but the suffering of the mind will not be there.
Yes, because our we are an organism, right? My body is an organism.
Yes.
So my heart is beating,
but
I am digesting.
You say my body.
Yeah, for understanding I use that word.
But similarly, you will say my pain.
Yeah, that's the difference which makes between the enlightened being and the non-enlightened being. Because the non-enlightened person will get attached to pleasure and pain. Okay, but the now enlightened person, he will not be attached to pain.
But he will still experience the pain.
He will experience.
That's
because
all I'm saying.
It's an organism.
That's
all
what
I'm saying. The body is an organism.
So I'm agreeing with you. The experience of pain will continue.
Yeah, pain is inevitable,
Yes.
but suffering is optional.
I agree with you. But it's not optional as in we have a choice or control it.
No.
It will happen or not happen.
Yes.
It will happen or not
Because
happen.
if you have that sense of controlling, then the sense of doership will come.
Correct.
Okay, I want something, I want to get something.
Correct.
I am the controller.
So
who is
similarly,
the controller here?
Similarly, you seem to have understood and accepted there's no individual doer. Correct?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So then chasing enlightenment or wanting enlightenment, pursuing enlightenment, can you get it? You as Sam, can Sam do anything to get enlightenment?
See, I would rather not use the word get it because we always see life, in the beginning also I used that word, we always see life or some concepts and we always try to get it as a reward. When you treat something as a reward, then the sense of want will be there.
No, that's semantics as far as I'm concerned. I'm asking you a simple question.
Okay.
You seem to accept there's no individual doer.
Yes.
So then my concept is, Sam can't do anything to get enlightenment.
No.
It will happen or not
Yes.
if it's his destiny.
But if I
There's no but, sir.
Wait.
There's no but.
I'll just continue. Wait, the understanding of I will not. I'm fully incapable of not getting something. That understanding is intelligence.
Is what?
Intelligence. It's not intellectual understanding. It is an intelligence because I find myself like I'm fully incapable of getting the other, the ground. I will call that as an other because everything I'm trying and everything I'm trying to get something, like that is also a form of ego, because you, as you said, it's a controller. I want to control that also. I want to control that other, the concept, because I find my relationships are failing, and my business is failing, my family is failing. So the ego wants that.
I agree.
Ego wants that because the ego is utterly sees the failure in everything. So the ego wants to grab that one.
But do you accept the concept the self is everything?
Self?
Is everything?
Yeah,
It's only the self.
Yeah, that's what you're talking about, the ultimate. But I'm talking about in the
No, I'm
relative
talking
sense.
about the relative. This is very important. Because otherwise this understanding is not practical for daily life. Yes? So I'm talking about the relative. I'm not talking about the ultimate. The self is not an ultimate concept for me. The self is right here, it's everything. It's this stool, this cup, it's you, it's me.
But I would like to add one
Let
quote
me
of
finish.
Ramana Maharshi.
Let me finish.
Yeah.
My question simply is, if you accept even intellectually the self is everything, is the ego also the self?
Ego?
Is the ego also the self? If you accept the self is everything,
Okay.
you understand and accept the self is everything. Often I find people then think of the ego as something bad or something that has to be got rid of.
Mhm.
But if we come back first to the understanding, the self is everything, consciousness, God, life is everything, and we look again at the ego, is the ego part of the self? An aspect, a manifestation, an expression of the self?
Yeah, that's what the scripture says.
So one easy way of looking at it then is there's one self,
Mhm.
one I,
Mhm.
as Ramana called it, the capital I.
Mhm.
The self as capital I.
Mhm.
And the individual ego as the small I. Big I, small I.
Mhm.
So there's one capital I,
Mhm.
self. 8 billion, roughly, at the moment on this planet, small I's, egos.
Mhm.
8 billion egos because there are 8 billion body-mind organisms.
Yes.
Yes? So one of the ways that the mind can find order in what seems to be a paradox is there's, at the relative level, all these different kinds of suffering.
Yes.
And the ego is playing the central role
Yeah.
because it believes certain things.
Yes.
So I totally agree with you. But if we zoom back to the basic understanding,
Mhm.
that ego playing that role is actually the one self.
Yeah.
So in some way that individual ego is able to accept whatever's happening in this role I am playing in this life is exactly what is meant to be, moment by moment, because it is the self.
Mhm.
Now this is really interesting because I've experienced some of the things you just described, and I'm happy later if you want to talk more in detail about these things. That the same kind of difficulty, suffering, dislike, even intense pain, I've experienced intense pain in my life, is happening. There's absolute crystal clear understanding. This is also the self. This is meant to be.
This is
Meant to be.
okay.
And the kind of suffering, which I call the mental, psychological, emotional suffering,
Mhm.
that stems from the basic issue, whether it be physical pain, or work, or relationship, or money, that mental, emotional suffering dissolves. And what is left is the basic issue. And in practical terms, what might happen is the rest of the mind, what I call the working mind, is free of those mental stories, that mental suffering, and can directly address the issue at hand. Sometimes. You understand what I'm saying? The energy is not going into the suffering. It's not being consumed by the mental story, the anxiety, the fear, the worry, the expectations of the future. It's not being consumed by the past. It's not being consumed by blame, guilt, shame, hatred. Okay? So that energy is available in the moment to address the issue, maybe try and find a solution if possible. Or the opposite can happen. There's a total disinterest in the issue at hand, even though it's painful. This is more rare, but I've experienced it, and this seems to be what Ramana and Maharaj were experiencing when they had intense physical pain from the cancer. It was a total disinterest of that pain. But to understand specifically, it was a disidentification with the body.
Yes. Yes.
That can only happen, and it doesn't always happen.
Does it always happen?
Very rarely happens. The pain builds up, builds up, builds up. Yes? And as it gets more severe, the natural response is to do something about the pain. Take a pill, alleviate it, whatever it is. Whatever kind of pain, yes? Occasionally, the pain comes, and it plateaus, and we can remain conscious with the pain. Sometimes the pain increases, and the body-mind organism becomes unconscious. Yes, faints or becomes unconscious because the pain is too severe. Sometimes the pain increases, and there's a disidentification with the pain, like a samadhi state. Yes, we're conscious, everything else is functioning, but the pain is kind of in the background. It's not being identified. I come back to the first part. If the ego intellect is understood, I am an inseparable part of the self. Whatever's happening, the source of my pain or suffering is also an inseparable part of the self. Whatever's happening. That takes away the blame, guilt, the shame, the hatred and the pride. It takes away expectations, and it takes away worries. It takes away anxieties. That for me is the end of suffering in this life. Is that okay for now? I'll come back to you in a minute because I'm on that.
Yes.
We can continue, huh?
Yeah, we can continue. I would like to add one quote of Ramana Maharshi, but you just continue.
No, please add, then
No, you can't.
I have a very small question.
I have to search it from my mobile.
Okay.
So you just talk.
Okay. We'll come back to it.
Yes.
Come back to the quote.
So, Ragi, what you said about this disidentification with the pain. So, does it happen once to everyone who has realized the truth, or
No.
it's like chance, like it may or may not happen, even to somebody like Ramana?
And the fact of the matter is, if we look at Ramana's story, the first time the cancer appeared, he accepted treatment. They operated. And when it came back again, for whatever reason, he decided not to have treatment. Yeah? So the first time there was some response to wanting to get rid of the sickness, pain. The point of the matter is that Ramana's response had to happen. Ramana's response was a happening within the self as the self. Ramana wasn't the author of that response. The same with apparently Jesus crying out on the cross, if we believe the story. On the cross, as he was being crucified, Jesus Christ cried out, "Why have thou forsaken me?" Talking to God. Yes, forsaken means, why have you forgotten me? Why have you abandoned me? Yeah? Yes? It just happened. So the body, mind, organism, ego will go through what it has to go through. When that understanding is firmly established, there's no expectation, this will be the right action, this will be the wrong action, this will be the right response, this will be the wrong response. Oh, I have the understanding, I should be reacting this way. All that disappears. So that's why this idea there are enlightened beings and non-enlightened beings creates a whole bunch of beliefs. Yes? And naturally, the intellect takes some of those beliefs and makes claims. If you're enlightened, you will behave like this. If you're not enlightened, you'll behave like this. Yes? If I'm enlightened, then all this will stop. If I'm not enlightened, that's why this is happening. Yes? But all that's referring to the object. Yeah?
So the only difference is is the difference in the understanding, but fundamentally there is no difference.
The difference is very specific in the way life is lived. And I use Ramesh's concept, which from my experience seems to be relevant. One's attitude to life changes. One's attitude to life changes. Attitude to life meaning the duality of life, pain and pleasure. One's attitude changes. The flow of life, which we can't control, one's attitude changes. This change of attitude means that the mind, intellect, ego is not claiming certain things, is not believing certain things. So that's why blame doesn't arise anymore. That belief is gone, so blame doesn't arise. So what's left is a difficult situation with a person or whatever it is. There's still something happening, there's a consequence, yes? You can't pretend it's all hunky-dory, yeah? Good days, bad days. Otherwise we're trapped in this idea that enlightenment is this kind of utopic state. Yes? And some people still believe that. That's why with Sam I went through it. If you see that physical pain will continue, if you see that sickness and disease will continue, and what is the end of suffering? Then it becomes very clear for the ego intellect. Yes? And why some ego intellects are expecting, no, this, plus I will get this, I will get this, I will get this, I will get that. Yeah? You know my story about the young Indian man who came to see Ramesh in Bombay. And I forget how old he was, but he was quite young. And he immediately said, I want enlightenment. So Ramesh said, thank you very much, that's very good. What do you think it will give you, which you don't already have? And he immediately said, I will have no more sickness, no more disease. And he went on to say, I will have powers. I'll be able to heal, manifest. And he said, I'll have lots of women. I'll have money. He also said, I'll be able to be in several places at the same time. He had a long list of things he imagined that enlightenment would give him.
I mean, all those things there are people who have attained those things, but that's not that.
Possibly.
Yeah.
But for him, this is what enlightenment meant. So Ramesh said, okay, great, thank you. Can I tell you what enlightenment has brought me? He said, yes. And Ramesh said, I've been married to the same woman for more than 65 years. I have more pains and problems in my body than before. I have less money than before. I can't heal anybody. I can't be in two places at the same time. And he went on like this. And Ramesh said, would you like me to tell you what it has given me? And at this stage, the young man wasn't so interested. He said, okay. Ramesh said, unbroken peace of mind. Unbroken peace of mind. And Ramesh asked the young man, would you like this? And the young man said, no thank you.
Why not have it and then go for whatever you want?
Because he was convinced that enlightenment was all these things. That's why he was wanting enlightenment.
I'm saying, even if you believe that, why not have what is being offered and then go for?
That was him.
Maybe he read autobiography of a yogi.
So sometimes the fear will arise, even with this understanding. Because the fear is either a biological reaction to something in the moment, or the fear is coming from the old mental habits, the old programming, the old software. Yes? So the fear arises, it lasts a certain amount of time, and then it goes. But the difference is, when the fear comes, there's no fear of the fear. That means there's no fear, how long will this fear last? Will this fear never go away? Yes? Those kinds of fears drop away. There's just the fear in the moment, which has a certain duration, and then that will disappear. And the second thing is our relationship to God, or the mountain, or whoever it is, doesn't actually have to disappear completely. If you look at Ramana, he still talked about the mountain. Arunachala, yes? Still talked about the self. He still had pujas in the ashram. Yes? He still took part in all that. So as a daily practice, or whenever you feel like doing it, it doesn't have to disappear. Because you enjoy it. It's also satisfying some basic, healthy, normal human needs. What disappears is the belief that God is separate from you. Nisargadatta Maharaj used to do pujas every day. He had a small shrine in his house, and he used to do pujas. So somebody asked him, why do you still do pujas? And he said, I enjoy doing pujas.
What about Buddha?
So that level, on a daily basis, some of the things we enjoy continue. But there's no strong belief behind them. We're just doing it because we enjoy doing it, or it's satisfying certain physical, emotional, psychological needs. So the ego intellect is quite relaxed about it. It's not judging itself for doing it or not doing it. It's just enjoying doing it. So even if the need or the desire arises to talk to God, you recognize that is a spontaneous happening. It is meant to be. Talk to God. Nothing stops you from talking to God. But if the mind, intellect intervenes and says, no, but God doesn't really exist, now that I understand that, I should not be talking to God, that's different. Yes? So as this understanding goes even deeper, you might experience still talking to God because you enjoy it, because you want to. There doesn't have to be a belief behind it anymore, or even a specific reason. And then the fundamental relationship that changes is that talking to God or praying to God is no longer begging or asking. Yes? It could be gratitude. It could be just because you like the conversation. Yes? It could be out of curiosity. Another way of looking at it is, it's not a concept I often use, but the so-called higher and lower self. Or if you see it as information which is available, like a psychic, a clairvoyant, has access to information that is available about other people, about the future, about the past. Yes? So God has all the information. The self, God, life has all the information. If we want to have access to it, we can ask to have access to it. Nothing stops us from asking. Maybe we'll get some information, maybe not. What should I do, God, about my job, my relationship, my travel plans? Yes? Should I go here? Should I go there? Nothing stops us from asking. And the information will come from what we call God, consciousness, life, or what we can just call our higher self. Yes? It's still the one self. Yeah? And sometimes that information is very useful for making practical decisions in life. But the fundamental thing that changes in what you've understood is you no longer feel separate from God, the self, consciousness, life. And you no longer feel that you're making a mistake. Nothing is ever a mistake. And you no longer feel incomplete. So you're not separate from God, you're not making a mistake, and you're not incomplete. That's not a bad thing, is it? I had a similar experience when I was here at the ashram once, and I used to enjoy going sometimes to the ashram, and I'd either go around the samadhi, or sometimes I'd prostrate on the floor. And then one day I was, I think, either in the middle of prostrating or I just finished prostrating, I can't remember exactly, and it occurred to me a bit like you that I was prostrating to basically myself. Yes? And I think I tried it again a few times after that, but it didn't feel the same. So then I stopped prostrating.
So after that experience, you completely stopped prostrating, or?
Yes. But I'm always open to the fact that it might happen again, because we never know what life is going to bring us. That's what I'm saying about it not becoming a claim. You see? It becomes very relaxed in the mind experience of life. Yes? It may happen again, it may not. Okay, that's life.
Few days before, I was in other satsang courses where somebody said, I feel I am completely received, and this feeling I have it too, And when I don't have it, it closes something in the understanding. So I mean, when everything receives me, I mean the ventilator receives me, I don't know. Everything is open and everything can open. When ventilator doesn't receive me, or somebody, or some situation, or something in the life, I receive it like something defensive, or everything I understood some minutes before disappears. So that's what I feel, what I receive.
Are you okay with that?
Sometimes I'm not.
Are you okay with this? Are you okay with sometimes you are, sometimes you're not?
I think it's not natural. I say it's not easy to. I accept because I know I have to accept that, but that's not true.
Okay, so then you don't accept.
Yeah.
Are you okay with not accepting?
No. So I know that in this point, I know that, but it's not enough to know that.
So what do you want to do?
What I want to do is sometimes when I was sitting this morning drinking breakfast and when something wrong happens, if I leave that go through my body, even if it's not comfortable, that becomes something natural, something not so bad. Bad, but not so bad. So I can't explain more.
If we're honest with ourselves, we just don't like something and we complain about it. And we try and get rid of it. We try and change it. Or we like something and we're satisfied or we're okay. That's all that's happening. That's basically what's happening, isn't it? Nothing else. It's the duality of pain and pleasure.
Okay.
Yes, that's all.
Understand.
So life is pain and pleasure. That's not going to stop. Never. The basic duality is not going to stop. Sometimes we complain about it just because we don't like it. We understand it's the basic duality of life. It's God, it's the self, blah, blah, blah. Yes? Sometimes there's a mental complaining from a belief, this should not be happening. This is unfair. This is unjust. Yeah? That's a different kind of complaining and a different kind of suffering.
I don't complain. I blame me.
Okay?
It's worse.
You're blaming yourself.
Yeah.
Fine. But you're not the author. So blame will continue to come up, unfortunately, as long as you believe you are the author.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a moment where you have some pain or suffering, but you're not blaming yourself. Yes? So you have the pain and suffering, the thing you don't like, maybe you're even complaining, but there's no blame. Yeah? So it's a different kind of pain, different kind of suffering.
First level.
No. Yeah. But another way of looking at it is, who is blaming? Who is blaming himself? Ramak is blaming Ramak. Yes? Who is Ramak? Who do you think Ramak is?
At this moment, I believe Jean-Marc does exist.
I agree. I can see Ramak. But fundamentally, who is Ramak? What is Ramak? That's all? Just this? Isn't Ramak life?
Not at this moment, President.
Isn't Ramak always life? So that's maybe could be helpful for you, just to look again at what you deeply understand. Yes? Do you understand that you are life? Yes? Do you accept it?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
So then life is this. Life is blaming life. Ramak is life. Consciousness. God. Do you agree?
Yeah.
So God is blaming God. Where's the problem?
Helping me to see that, it's easier.
So you help yourself to see that.
Yeah.
You find a way to come back to that understanding. Yeah. But you might have to do it regularly. If you just come to a satsang once in a while, or just do a workshop, or so sometimes we need to have this regular reminder. It can be a practice, or it can just be a reminder. That helps to change the functioning of the intellect. It's just identification, isn't it? You forget you are life, consciousness, so you blame yourself. Yes? You remember you are life, there's no blame. Correct?
Yeah, I see. Thank you.
But-
For example,
But the thing is this, even if you're blaming yourself, you understand it's just a mechanism. You understand that. Who are you fundamentally? What do you think you are fundamentally? Tell me. What do you think you are fundamentally? What is your concept? What is your word? What is your understanding?
for example, I fall down with the scooter.
No.
No.
Jean-Marc, we can have many examples. Who are you fundamentally?
Yeah, it's an example where.
Don't give me an example. Just
No,
give
no.
me a basic, direct answer from what you understand already. Who are you fundamentally?
I am where this experience doesn't have any. It isn't problem. It's like life, and that's what I am. That's
So
what
I see. You don't like having a word. You don't like having a singular word for this. Like consciousness, life, God, source. You don't like that, do you? Tu aimes pas ça. Avoir un mot descriptif pour ça. Tu aimes pas ça?
No.
Okay. So you are this life having an experience,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So are all the experiences included in this? Est-ce que toutes les expériences sont incluses en ça?
Oui.
All the experiences are included in this.
Oui.
Good experiences, bad experiences. Remembering, forgetting. Yes? Pleasure, pain. Yes? Including blame. Yes? Including this tension. Yes? That's another experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this experience of tension that you describe is part of the totality of experience. Yes? So if you look at it like that, is there a problem?
No.
You fall from the scooter, you don't fall from the scooter. You feel like this, you don't feel like this. Everything is okay. Yes? Everything is part of that experiencing that's happening. Yes? Then you have a thought, I don't like this. Is it part of the totality of experiencing? Yes? Wonderful. So, whatever way you can, come back to that understanding. Because you already have the understanding. Yes?
Yeah.
But maybe it's not totally accepted.
Yeah.
There's intellectual understanding, which you have. But sometimes it's not totally accepted.
Yeah.
So reminding ourselves in any way we can, but on a regular basis, deepens the understanding and brings total acceptance. You see the mechanism?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know really how. Sometimes how to
To ask yourself.
yeah.
Just ask yourself like I did,
Yeah.
what am I fundamentally? Exactly the way I've been asking you.
Yeah.
You ask yourself, what am I fundamentally? And this answer will come up. I am life experiencing
Yeah.
itself, or whatever the answer is, yes? Otherwise, the old habit continues. Yes? And when we come to satsang, or we read a book, or whatever it is, then we remember. Yes? But if you're doing it regularly, maybe every day, maybe several times a day, it's possible this old habit changes. Okay. Because you already know who you are. Would you agree?
Yeah.
You know who you are.
Yeah. Sure.
So let me ask you this. If you forget who you are you still who you are?
Sure.
That's wonderful. Then we don't care about forgetting. But if you care about forgetting, then
Yeah.
remind yourself more regularly. You understand? Some people say, I don't care about forgetting. They're not being honest. So then it's useful to remind ourselves regularly. Then one day, we really don't care about forgetting. It's not intellectual anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So some level of brutal honesty is necessary. We have to be brutally honest with ourselves. The ego has to be honest with itself. So if you check and you find, no, actually, I would like to remember all the time, then you need the reminder regularly. And it seems like that's what you're saying. You don't like forgetting. Because then you feel this
Yeah.
tension in a different way. Yes? Maybe this tension is coming from forgetting, maybe the tension is coming from something else. We don't know. But part of the tension is when you feel you've forgotten who you are.
Yeah.
Then remind yourself who you are. More than you're doing now. It's very simple, Rama. If in life we've tried all the things we want to try, or most of the things, we've explored, we've traveled, we've worked, we've had family, whatever you've done, yes? You're still not satisfied. And if this is the one thing that satisfies you, then do more of this thing. What else are you going to do with the rest of your life? You have the time, you have the money, you have the energy, so just do this. Or as much as you can in your daily life. Yes? And then one day you won't need the reminder anymore. Because, as I always say, the intellect cannot cover up the knowing, the understanding. At the moment it's getting covered up, obscured, veiled, that's what we call forgetting. Yes? But it's just thoughts, ideas, beliefs that are covering it up, identification that covers it up. Yes? One day you don't need that anymore. Nothing can cover it up. You can feel tense, you can feel pain, you can feel this, you can feel... It doesn't matter. Anything else for now? So what?
Teach something. when there is tension like that, I have to keep is the honesty I see with what I see that. So the honesty is something I like to have. The honesty to see contraction, and that's where it's closed. It's closed. Only the idea, the thought of honesty, I have to see that.
I understand what you're saying. From your experience, your programming, maybe your genes, this honesty, authenticity is very important.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Because it's the conditioning, programming. Yes. The personality needs that.
Yeah.
Yes. So we keep that. We accept that. Now we look at what is honesty, what is authenticity, what is it really, what is it fundamentally. Is the self, life, this experience, is it honest or not honest? Is the self, consciousness, this experience, is it authentic or not authentic?
Yeah, I understand where I do the mistake, because I take this honesty for me.
That's okay. Keep that. Because maybe it's useful for you, for functioning in this life. We each have our needs. It's very important to accept that. And the needs sometimes make us feel vulnerable, weak, different things. too open, too closed. But that's our nature, that's who we are as the body-mind organism. That's important. Some people need quiet, some people need activity, some people need this, some people need that. I'm not asking you to change anything there. I'm just asking you to understand, is the self-consciousness, this experience that you described, is it honest or not honest? Is it authentic or not authentic? What do you find?
I think it is authentic. And I think it is authenticity too.
So can I tell you what I found? Yes? That when there's dishonesty, that is authentic. When there's honesty, that is authentic. When it is not authentic, it is also honest.
Yeah.
Because the self, consciousness, this experience is always everything that is happening.
Yes, that's what is forbidden. Sometimes some place forbidden to accept.
So the forbidden is also consciousness, the self, this experience. Non-acceptance is also consciousness, the self, this experience. So that's the understanding. That's the understanding. But in practical daily life, we like, we dislike. We accept, we don't accept. We want honesty, not dishonesty. We want authenticity, not the opposite. Yes? But we've always got this understanding. Whatever's happening is the self, consciousness, this experience of life. Everything is included. Including disliking it, including wanting to move away from it, protecting ourselves from it. Yes? But that absolute rejection disappears. The absolute judgment disappears. Relative judgment, yes. We need relative judgments to function in daily life. But the absolute judgments disappear. Yeah. So we can dislike even something about ourselves. And we can wish it would change, or we can try and change it. But we're totally accepting and understanding, I am also the self, consciousness, this life experience. There's a relative judgment of ourself, but there's no absolute judgment of ourself.
What's the difference?
Or the other person.
What is the difference? Relative judgment and absolute judgment. What is the difference?
So somebody once asked my teacher, does he still have judgments arising in the mind? Do they still come up? And he said, yes, sometimes I look out of the window, he lived on the 4th floor, and he said, I'll see somebody parking the car. And sometimes they park it really well, and there's no judgment. Sometimes they're parking it badly, and a judgment will come up about the way they're parking. I'm cooking a meal. I will judge it as a good or a bad meal. I'm doing a particular job. I'm judging it as a good or a bad job. That's what I mean about relative judgment. Absolute judgment would be, this should not be happening at all. This should not exist at all. Meaning, God should never have created that. The self should not be manifesting as that. That's an absolute judgment. Okay for now?
It's like judgment, but the acceptance at the same time. So what is being judged?
Very good. Or we can say there's a judgment, relative, but there's no judgment of the judgment. Judgment spontaneously arises. We can't control it because it's coming from our genes and our conditioning. Like all thoughts are spontaneously happening, yes? But for most of us, we've learned these thoughts are bad, these thoughts are good. These actions are bad, these actions are good. So there's a secondary judgment. I shouldn't be doing this, the other person shouldn't be doing that, yes? Something like that. I shouldn't be feeling this, I shouldn't be thinking this.
So the acceptance of the judgment itself.
Acceptance of the judgment itself.
So is there like a complete acceptance of, like, once the like for say in case of Ramesh Valsekar, was the acceptance like complete acceptance, or was there times where he was not able to accept?
There was complete acceptance that as Ramesh Valsekar, the ego, body, mind, organism, the judgments would sometimes arise.
Yeah, but like things like where, you know, like where there are things that we are not able to accept sometimes, like intense things. So in case of, like, say somebody like Ramesh Valsekar, does this tendency to not accept what's going on would arise, or would it?
That's what I mean. In the relative, we don't accept somebody's behavior, let's say. But we understand that their behavior is not in their control, not in their authorship. We understand they are an instrument of the self, consciousness, the source. So it's not accepted in the relative because some of our needs, desires, wants, likes, dislikes are not being met. So we don't accept it. We move away, we say something, we try and change them, whatever it is, yes? But the understanding is always there. This also is an expression of consciousness, God, the self. So in absolute terms, it's not rejected.
So that gives
Does that make sense?
no, I have a question.
Can I just finish with this?
Yeah. No, the follow-up question.
Okay.
The follow-up question. So you said that is also consciousness, a part of consciousness.
Only if you accept the basic concept that the self is everything. Some people don't accept that concept, don't even like that concept. Many human beings on the planet don't like this idea that the self, consciousness, God is everything. So those body, mind, organism, or ego intellects don't accept this concept. I'm only talking to the ego intellect that does accept this basic concept. Then we go from there and look at all the other beliefs. It's a bit like arithmetic. If we don't learn the basic addition, subtraction, multiplication, we can't do the more complicated stuff. Yeah? So similarly, really with the spiritual concepts, it's the same thing. All the beliefs we have come from the root belief. Once we understand the root belief, then we can easily look at the other beliefs, and many of them dissolve. That's why Ramana said, go as quickly as you can to the root. What is the I? See, we're talking about judgment, acceptance, non-acceptance, but it's the I that's talking about this, yes? Wanting it, not wanting it, understanding it, not understanding it. So Ramana would say, more often than not, first look at the I. What is this I? If the person is not ready for that, then we look at all the concepts, the beliefs, and at some point we come back to the I. Yeah? So often we're switching between this and that, yeah?
But in the world, the evil is existing, right?
Correct.
Like, for example, Hitler, serial killers. So, how can I see in the light of this concept?
So that's the thing. I totally agree with you. The first time I heard this concept, I heard it as the word Hitler. But somebody said to me, Mother Teresa and Hitler are both God. I couldn't accept it.
Yeah.
Couldn't
It's
accept it.
difficult.
And I argued with the guy for half an hour. I liked him a lot. He was a beautiful spiritual teacher. I liked him a lot. But I couldn't accept this concept. 2 years later, I came to Ramesh, and he said exactly the same thing. Mother Teresa and Hitler are both God. And I was surprised in the moment. I totally accepted the concept.
Why?
Then I understood something had changed in those 2 years, but I wasn't aware of how it had changed. My understanding and my openness to hear the words had changed. I didn't quite understand how exactly.
Okay, I'll give you another hypothetical question. Suppose some burglars are coming and breaking inside my house. Can I accept their behavior to steal or to harm my house family? Can I accept them? Because they are
So
also part of the self. Right?
That's exactly what I was saying. You might not accept them in the relative, meaning fight them off, call the police, do whatever you can to stop them. Stop that action. Because it's life-threatening, or at a more simple level, it's not satisfying the basic needs that we all have. Safety, security, love, etc., etc. But your understanding as it's happening is, oh, this is also consciousness, God, life. Not liking it and understanding can be there simultaneously. The example is when Skanda Ashram got robbed. Apparently, Ramana didn't even react to being beaten. Didn't shout, didn't defend himself. Yes? So in that instance, the deep understanding was obviously there, but the body-mind organism, conditioning genes, didn't react. But let's say he had reacted. Let's say he shouted, defended himself, or even beaten them back. As Ramana, would that have meant he had forgotten the understanding? No. The body-mind organism would always do what it's going to do based on the genes and the conditioning, the software, the programming. In Ramana's case, there wasn't that software programming conditioning for him to react. In another person, there will be. The understanding is always the same. So many of the paradoxes that we're struggling with in life, I found, get resolved in this way. I'll give you one example from my personal experience. My father was a politician in Sri Lanka and he was assassinated. He was shot.
Mm-hmm.
I know who did it. I know who gave the orders. Yes?
Mm-hmm.
I know those people, the weapon that was used, and my father are all consciousness, God, life. There's no doubt about it anymore. I never forget this. At the same time, I will not go and have lunch with them. I don't want to be friends with them. If I see their poster, because some of them are famous people, if I see their faces on a billboard, I don't like the look of them. There's absolutely no hatred. There's dislike. If one day they end up in prison, I might feel satisfied. I don't know, I can't predict. But there's no hatred.
Mm-hmm.
When I say we continue to dislike or not accept in the relative, that's what I mean. If somebody's harmed you, you will not want to be their best friend anymore, or help them maybe. That's okay. That's normal. But you won't be blaming them, and you won't be hating them.
So for a seeker, where you have to start? Like, okay, there is a concept, everything is Brahman, everything is self, okay? And I'm walking on the fields, and I saw a venomous snake is passing in front of me. I cannot go and stamp on the snake, okay? Because that is also self. I can go and stamp, and even if the snake reacts and bites me, oh, that is also self. No, my body has a reflex mechanism.
Correct.
Right. So that is not fear. So I have to protect myself.
It is a kind
because
of fear.
That's a no.
It's a biological fear.
No, I will tell. I know. I didn't complete. So that's a reflex mechanism. But say that moment, I will protect myself from the venomous snake. But if I'm staying inside my house, four corners closed, and a safety environment, and if I get the fear of the snake, that is psychological fear.
Sometimes it can be both. I have a biological fear of snakes from my childhood. And I looked to see whether I had a bad experience with a snake. And I couldn't find one. I even did hypnosis, regression, all kinds of things. Then one day here in Tiru, I had some strange memories coming up. Almost like a memory of another life where I was a snake. It's very strange. And I'm just sharing this. I don't know. I'm not attaching any importance to it. So it kind of explained why I had a biological fear of snakes. Kind of. Yes? I'm open to the idea that one of my ancestors had had some issues with snakes and I had inherited that fear. Quite possible. The difference I find now with the understanding is I will still see a snake. I'm less afraid of snakes, but I'm still afraid of snakes in the sense that what I call the biological fear arises as a response to the situation in the moment. It's a present moment reaction.
Yeah. Yes.
The psychological fear does not arise.
Correct.
So my concept is that we continue to live with all the biological reactions depending on our genes and conditioning, genes, programming, life experiences. But it's possible to live completely without psychological fear.
Yeah. Yes.
But it's impossible to predict. As you said, if somebody breaks in here, whether we will defend or not, it's impossible to predict.
That moment I will know.
Exactly.
When people are breaking in my house, that moment I will act.
Exactly.
But I don't know what I will do. That's
So the mind that has this understanding stops trying to predict. Apart from if it feels like it, and again nothing stops us, we take precautions. Extra locks, cameras, another gate, maybe a security guard. We plan.
Yes.
That's quite normal.
Yes.
And if it still happens, we know we will react as we are supposed to react in that moment.
Yes. Right.
Defending ourselves or not is not going to be a mistake.
Right.
Because that person is the self. We are the self.
Right.
The self is attacking the self. The self is defending itself against the self. It's always the self.
So, I am having an ego. That's a fact. Right. I'm having an ego.
I'm pleased to hear it.
Yeah. That's a fact. So, and I'm hearing this message from the enlightened people like Nisargadatta and Ramana Maharshi. They are saying you are the higher self. That's self. Okay. So I'm just hearing it. Okay, intellectually. I'm just hearing, or I'm just repeating it again and again. Is this the right point of starting my sadhana, or do I want to see that I am ego? That is a fact, right? I am having fear. That is a fact. I don't know what Ramana Maharshi is saying, because for him it's a fact, but I don't know that. I didn't experience that. But having fear is a fact.
I totally agree with you, Simon, and I agree with
So
you.
where I want
and
to
I
start,
sympathize
that's
with
what
you.
my precisely
Yes.
I'm asking, where I want to start.
So if we look at one thing is to look at the way they shared, particularly those two people.
Okay.
They were always talking to individual people in the moment. So the concepts that came out in that moment was for that person. Later, in both those two cases, Maharaj and Ramana, they became books. Maharaj never wrote a book,
Yes.
didn't edit a book. Ramana never wrote a book, might have done some editing of one of the books or two of them. That's the first thing. It's always a response to the seeker and the seeker's understanding in that moment. Then when we read it later, we hear it as a blanket explanation. Or some people hear it as the truth. Awareness is everything. Higher self is what we are, etc., etc. Somewhere else in the book, sometimes we find them both saying, everything is the self. Sometimes they even go into the details. Sometimes not. So if we take the collection of concepts from these two, then we can see there's going to be variations and sometimes contradictions, because they're talking to different people, and that's been recorded and transcribed into a book. If we take a specific aspect like the ego, and we just take Ramana, I can think of at least 3 or 4 ways he described the ego. The same person describing the ego in 3 or 4 different ways. Once he said, kill the false sense of self. Kill the ego. Kill the false sense of self. The false, individual, separate sense of self. Kill that. Yes? Somewhere else he would have said it in a different way. Somewhere he said the ego is like a burnt rope. Yes? So when you read again the different ways he's expressing it, you start to understand. And then he says the sage does have an ego. Yes? You understand what he's pointing to. There's an ego, yes. The ego is the I thought. Yes. Ego is very useful. Yes. But the ego, through conditioning from birth, has a false sense, understanding of who or what it is. The false understanding is, I am a separate object. I am the author of my actions. I am the doer of my actions. That is false. Let that go. Keep the ego. Ego as an I thought exists. I am Ragi exists. I am I'm happy or sad exists, but this I, this ego, is an aspect of God, the self-consciousness. Like the wave is an aspect of the ocean,
Okay.
the wave continues to exist.
So you are saying ego is an aspect of God.
Yes, because everything is an aspect of God.
But you know, I will read one of the sayings of Ramana Maharshi. He said it differently. I'll just read this out. Without understanding it correctly, people think thou art that as something which will make them more powerful than anything else. The man is already vain. What will happen if the same I is greatly inflated? He will be even more foolish and ignorant. This false I must perish. Its annihilation is the fruit of Guru service. Ramana Maharshi, conscious immortality. So here he calls the man is already vain. Okay, I am vain. Okay, my actions are vain. And what I do is from the limiter. Okay, now I am hearing an unlimited message, like the unlimited source of power. And that unlimited source of power is saying you are unlimited. Now, my ego, because I didn't understand the message correctly, like non-verbally, that message didn't penetrate inside of me. My ego is getting inflated. And I am saying, okay, I am doing the foolishness, I'm continuing to do the foolishness, I'm continuing to do the damage to the people, but I'm calling myself not Sam, I'm calling myself as the great self. Is this a mistake? Or is this a poor understanding?
The second part of the message answers your question.
Okay.
Read the second part. The false sense of something.
The man is already vain.
Second
what will
part.
happen if the same I is
Yeah.
greatly inflated? He will be even more foolish and ignorant.
Right.
The false I must perish.
That's exactly.
Its annihilation is the fruit of Guru service.
The false I must perish.
Okay.
So you're right about the first part. If the intellect takes the first part of the message, it becomes inflated.
So how to perish the false self? So practically, like in my day-to-day, like meeting people, interacting with people, talking to my servant, how to, because if I talk with my superior, I will show my respect. Like I will sound phony to them, because I always act a predictable nature. If I talk with my inferiors, there the ego goes, like controlling them, or trying to control them, or trying to blame them, trying to put them down, having a sense of superiority. So how to perish that exactly, like in a practical way?
What Ramana said, some kind of self-inquiry.
Self-inquiry.
He suggested a specific kind of self-inquiry. There are several kinds of self-inquiry.
Right. Okay.
And the difference between self-inquiry and meditation, that's sometimes useful to understand. For me, meditation, there's always an object. The breath, the sound, light, the visualization. There's some kind of object of focus or attention.
Mm-hmm.
Yes? And that helps the mind intellect to become more one-pointed, more focused. But self-inquiry, in the traditional sense of Ramana, is looking at the source or the root of this I. And that is not an object. And in something he's spoken about, it's in one of the books, he even says, who am I, or am I, is not a question. It sounds like a question. Sometimes it's even written with a question mark. So the trick is to try and repeat it when you sit in the ashram. I used to do that. Sit in the ashram. Let it gently come up. Who am I? Who am I? But don't look for an answer. Understand? You cannot find a specific answer. It's not a question. Don't look for an answer. If an answer comes, and it will, That's the nature of the intellect. I am silence. I am nothing. I am everything. Various answers will come. Understand that any answer that comes as thoughts is only one part of duality. If the answer comes, I am everything, sometime the answer will come, I am nothing. That's duality. But logically, we can't be just duality. And there's silence. No answers are coming. So during the inquiry, there's mental silence, the absence of thoughts. After we stop the inquiry, the intellect comes back and makes a conclusion, I am silence. That's also not accurate.
Like verbalizing. Always we used to verbalize inside our mind.
So try not to get attached to the answers, any answers. Continue it, and it works on its own. It goes to the root, goes to the root, goes to the root. For some people, this can reveal the false sense of I.
For
Not
some people, you are saying.
Yes.
Why for
because
not all the people?
Each mind intellect is a little different. So this appeals and works for some minds, doesn't for others.
Okay.
If you take Maharaj's instruction from his gurus, he did I am, the repetition of I am. Every day, maybe several times a day, for 2 years, he repeated I am, I am, I am. That worked for him. Okay? So if you want, experiment with both. I have an exercise we do sometimes in the groups where we take I am, but we add every single other word we can think of. I sometimes ask people to think of everything you dislike, everything you cannot accept. I am anger, I am war, I am Putin, and I go on like this. It starts to dissolve the idea that these things should not exist, that these things are not the self. I am Hitler. Yes? If I say I am consciousness, I am peace, I am happiness, I am love, that the ego intellect likes, generally. So that's why I deliberately do this other exercise. But at some point, it's dissolving this false sense of I. The important thing is, it's dissolving it without the ego intellect knowing exactly how it's happening. It's working on its own.
Okay. Like non-verbal penetration.
Even verbal penetration, we all have a understanding or a belief of how it's working. With these aspects of this particular teaching, it's really a mystery, it's happening on its own. Okay for today?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.